All right, geometry. So what you're going to be doing is doing a review that's going to get ready for you to take a quiz. And this is over conditional statements. It's going to be over if-then statements. All right. So we're going to do this review, go over the answers, and do a little notes along the way just to make sure you understand what's going on. So the review is in your Go formative. So review, quiz, conditional statements. And there you go. Okay. Now, when you're in Go formative, you can always zoom in to see it better, check out your answer choices, and hit show questions to put your answers on the right-hand side over here, right? So I'm going to be showing you I'm going to be working on it over here on this whiteboard, that way I can draw on it, okay? But here we go. Now, first thing we notice is that these words, we have converse, inverse, contrapositive, and biconditional, okay? So what I want to do off to the side here is do some quick notes, okay? So let's start off with this. Can I move this? So a conditional statement is an if blank, then blank statement. All right. So if blank, then blank. Okay. Now, this first part is called the P, the hypothesis, P for hypothesis. And then the second after the then is what we call the Q for the conclusion. Now, I know there's no Q in conclusion, but if you force it, it can kind of sound like conclusion. Now, if P, then Q. Okay, so let me just put a little statement in here. Now, you may not agree with this, but if I'm Mr. G, then I'm cool. All right, so this is going to be my statement here. Okay, if I'm Mr. G, then I'm cool. Now, what I want to do is actually type that up here. Can I do that? Why don't you move, buddy? Hold on one second. There we go. Okay. Now, what the first thing is, what's the hypothesis? So if blank, oh, actually, let me back that up. Let's get that correct. There we go. Very cool. Now, okay. Sorry, I'm still working on this program here. So let's first of all get these little random dots. Now, if I'm Mr. G, then I'm cool, right? Okay, well, anyways, so this first part is my P hypothesis, and the second part is my Q conclusion. And sorry that kind of looks ugly. All right, so we got 3 or 4 different things we can do with this statement, okay? So the first thing we do is the converse is you switch P and Q. All right, so my new sentence would be, if I'm cool, then I'm Mr. G. Okay, do you see how that works? So if I switch P and Q, if I switch the first part with the second part, that's the converse. So the cool and the Mr. G switch places. So now if I'm cool, then I'm Mr. G. That's the converse. I like to think of Converse shoes, and if I tie my shoes, I switch my hands as I'm tying. That's how you tie shoes. You know, lace over lace. So there you go. That's one way to think of converse switches the order. Okay. The second thing you got to know is called an inverse, and that's where you negate P and Q. Negate is a fancy way of saying opposite or not. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my original. If I'm Mr. G, then I'm cool, and I'm just going to make it opposite. So what's the opposite of being Mr. G? Not being Mr. G. What's the opposite of being cool? Not being cool, right? So I'm going to make my sentence. If I'm not Mr. G. Do you see how that's the opposite of my original P over here, right? Then I'm not cool. And that's the opposite of my Q, my conclusion, right? So that's what an inverse is. It takes the original sentence and makes it opposite and opposite, okay? So I think of it kind of like if I have P and Q, if I just flip them over, that's what invert means, and that just means not, okay? This is the hardest one. It's called a contrapositive, okay? Now this is where you switch and negate P and Q. All right, so you're going to switch and negate. All right, so for contrapositive, if I switch and negate P and Q, let's give it a shot here. So check out P and Q. They're going to switch places like a converse, and then you're also going to, at the beginning, negate them. So it's putting those knots on there. Make it opposite, and then switch the order, okay? So the conclusion is going to go to the front and become opposite, not cool. So if I'm not cool, then, and then my hypothesis, Mr. G, is going to go to the end and become opposite. I'm not Mr. G. Okay, so do you see how contrapositive is the most complicated contrapositive one? So you have to make it opposite and switch the order, okay? So far we've got 3 different ones, and what you just should have done on 2-3 is learn what a biconditional is, okay? Biconditional uses so it has no if, then, and it uses if and only if in the middle. Between P and Q. All right, so check it out. Let me move this. All right. So here's the deal. No if, the if goes away. No then, the then goes away. So I'm going to start with just the P, which is I'm Mr. G. And now in the middle, right here, after that hypothesis, I'm going to use this new phrase, if and only if. If and only if. And then my Q conclusion is I'm cool. So a biconditional is the bi means two means it works 2 ways. It's true both ways, right? Now you may disagree. And obviously this is just a funny sentence, but this is just for note's sake. If I'm let me start over. I'm Mr. G, if and only if I'm cool. So that's how you do a biconditional, okay? So these are the 4 you need to know for your quiz. And right now we're going to look at that review. So your quiz is, after this review, but let's talk about this review using this information, okay? So I'm gonna move back over here, okay? Now, number 1, given the following sentence, identify the converse, right? So if a polygon has 3 sides, then it's a triangle. All right, so there's my hypothesis is a polygon has 3 sides. My conclusion is it's a triangle. Now, what did we say about converse? Okay, let's go back over here to the notes. A converse switches P and Q, right? So let's do that. If we switch P and Q, if we take a polygon has 3 sides and it's a triangle and flip the order, which one of these answer choices just flips that order? Well, it would be if it's a triangle, then that polygon has 3 sides. Well, what do you know? It's letter C. Okay, because converse switches P and Q. Right? All right. Whoops, come back. That's number 1, right? All right, let's move this down a little bit. Number 2, we'll do this in blue. We want to find the inverse of the same sentence. Okay, so once again, we got P, we got Q, and we want to find the inverse. Let's remember, inverse is when we do what? We negate P and Q, which means we just put not and not in front of it to make them opposites. We don't switch the order. We take the original and just make it opposite. So let's do that. So the question is, what is the opposite of a polygon has 3 sides? Well, the opposite would be a polygon doesn't have 3 sides. And what's the opposite of it's a triangle? It is not a triangle, right? So remember, it's we negate P and Q. Negate is a fancy word for opposites or putting not. Okay, so if a polygon does not have 3 sides, then it is not a triangle. That would be letter B. Cool? All right. That was number 2. Let's try number 3. Now, 3 says, given the following sentence, identify the contrapositive. Remember, contrapositive is that weird one where you're going to do 2 things. You're going to negate P and Q, make them opposite, and then you switch the order. Okay? Negate, make them opposite, P and Q, and then switch the order. So let's do that. Do this in a new color. Do this in green. All right, so if same sentence, if a polygon has 3 sides, then it's a triangle. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to negate P and Q and switch. Switch the order, right? So do you see how we're doing what number 1 and number 2 did? We're both together. We're switching after we negate. All right, so let's think about that. Let's take the conclusion, the Q, which is it is a triangle. We're gonna negate it. It is not a triangle, and put that at the beginning after we switch it. So it's gonna be if it is not a triangle, then, and at the end, it's gonna be the opposite of a polygon has 3 sides. So it would be a polygon doesn't have 3 sides. Okay. So if it is not a triangle, then that polygon doesn't have 3 sides. That's letter D here. Okay. Last but not least, we'll do this in, I don't have another color here. We'll do it in rainbow color, whatever. Biconditional. Now remember, that one, we use this fancy phrase, if and only if. Okay, there's no P, there's no if, and there's no then, right? So please notice right here, no if, no then, right? Like they're just not there. The only thing is if and only if, okay? And that goes in the middle between the hypothesis and the conclusion. All right, so this one can be easier to identify. Where do I see if and only if? Well, on this one, letter A, okay, remember, biconditional is if and only if in the middle between P and Q. All right, so that would be letter A right there. All right, now I know I did all this work on this whiteboard here, but I'm going to make sure I have my answers put onto the Go formative. So I had what? C, B, D, A. Go back to the Go formative. All right, and so you make sure your answers are in there, and you can hit submit. Your quiz after this is going to be very similar to this, okay? Same things are going to be asked of you. Just be careful of the order of the answers and the sentences, the way they're structured. Okay, they may be a little bit trickier, but you can do it. Okay, so once again, make sure you go over these notes. Make sure you understand the conditional, the converse, the inverse, the contrapositive, and the biconditional statement. With all that information, you'll be good to go for that quiz after the review here. All right, we'll see y'all.